Hello everyone, and welcome to this tutorial. I'll be sharing with you how to use the Puppet Warp tool inside of Adobe Photoshop. It is such a fun and easy tool to use that renders really great results at your fingertips. And so basically, if you think of a Puppet Warp, it manipulates the image by having you control points and giving you an image manipulation that you'd like. So maybe you'd like to move a certain part of an image and keep one part the same. So some of you might have seen this kind of image in TikTok. It is quite fun and easy to use. So let's dive into it. All right, so welcome. We are inside of Photoshop here, and I am using 2020. Version 2020. So I just want to show you real quickly how the Puppet Warp tool can just change. This is my original static image, and I went from that to this. So you can see right away that we're getting a very different image from the original image I started with. If you look at this one, you'll see the tail is up and this front leg is this way, okay? And if you look at the second one I created with the Puppet Warp tool, you'll notice that the tail is different and the leg is also different, okay? Some of the body movements are also different. So we can sort of look at this and say, you know, this is kind of like what the Puppet Warp tool can allow you to do. And this is just the basics, right? So, let me show you how to use this Puppet Warp tool inside of Photoshop. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is bring up, when you're going to animate something or create movements, it's a good idea to pull up a chart of, in this case, I'm doing a cat, right? So I pulled up these different positions of animations of a cat. And this can be a visual guide for you when you are doing this sort of technique with the Puppet Warp. So essentially, the Puppet Warp helps you to kind of manipulate the image, gives you that flexibility by giving you points to control the movement that you want. And so this is our original. And what I'm going to do, as always, I tell you guys to duplicate Command J. Okay, so you're going to subject select and then get your transparent background. And you can throw on any color you want. And so at this point, with the layers selected, okay, I'm going to turn off my original, select that one. And so go up to Edit, and let's start the Puppet Warp now. And go down to where it says Puppet Warp, and you're going to see a mesh come over. Actually, my mesh was turned off. So in the control bar here is where all the kind of settings are. Okay, so if I zoom in here, Command plus, so what you can see here is that I kind of have this pin option here. And let's talk about the density up here. So the density is the amount of mesh crosshairs you're seeing. And so if I were to put that to more, you'll see that it increases. And so based on the size of the object you're working with and the precision of points you need to add with the pin to control, that's why you're going to need more or fewer points. Okay, so if you're doing like a big building, fewer points would be good for that. Okay, all right, so I'm going to go to more points. I just work that way. And expansion, if I were to zoom in a little bit more, you'll see that there's like a 2-pixel expansion around the subject. I don't really need that. There's some cases in which that might be effective, but I want my mesh to be snug over my subject. So I'm putting it to 0. You also have the option to turn the mesh off and on, and you can still place points where you want to. That mesh is there to help you decide where to put the points. Okay, we'll get into what the depth, pin depth is in just a second. So at this point, I want to show you just basically how this works. So if I were to go and put a point there and a point there, and then I start to move this, okay, you'll see that everything's kind of moving, and that's not really what I want, right? So I can move this. I'm actually moving where the point is. So you can see I'm moving something. But so basically, think of the points as like joints, right? So these these pinpoints are like your arm. If you're moving your arm, you need to anchor points and then add other points to create the movement. So generally, what I'll do is generally just sort of like anchor down all the feet down to the floor. And then now if I move, you'll see that I can get some movement here because I've anchored down those points on the bottom. So just like that, it's so cool. You can see how awesome that is, right? Okay, so just to show you that. So let's do some more movements here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So let's say I want to move the tail now. So I'm going to put an anchor here and an anchor here. So then if I move this, you can see now that it's moving the tail. And what's really awesome that Photoshop's doing is that it's actually restraining some of or it's actually moving the rest of this subject according to the parts we're moving. So you can see that I can do something like that, and I can keep doing all sorts of fun things. Like I said, this is a really fun sort of a feature that's inside of Photoshop. So let's say I like that, and then I can put another point there. And then there's another function here, which is really cool. So let me just, while we're in here, we can't zoom. So I'm going to use my navigator. And then I can sort of, actually I want to delete that point. So if you want to delete a point, just click on it and hit the delete key. And I want to bring this point a little bit inside. And the reason is I want to show you this other feature. If you hold Option Alt on the computer, you get this like rotation aspect which will rotate around the point. So if I wanted to create like a curl in the tail, I could sort of do that. And so this is kind of really, really cool that you can sort of manipulate these pixels this way. It is what I would say is that my point here is too close to the edge. And so this really does take it's just a matter of practicing to understand where the points are and how you're going to be able to manipulate it. So you can see there, that gave me a little bit more leeway or leverage to work with those pixels versus if I had the pin at the end. So I might even undo that, Command-Control-Z, and delete this point again. I delete that one as well. Notice I'm clicking on it just to delete it. And I want to undo that, Command-Control-Z, and maybe just go a little bit more in, and then holding the Option, and creating that curve. What I want is, this is not going to be good, right? So always when you're working with this, you want to make sure you're turning the mesh off and on so that you're seeing that you're not creating any kind of distraction or distortion rather in your image, because this is not professional. It's not going to look good. So basically make sure that you're checking how it's looking by turning off the mesh off and on, sorry. So here we go. So don't overdo it. Do movements that are smooth, keeping your outlines looking organic and smooth. Okay, so then I can also, so that was the Option key that helps you to rotate things. So now let's move ahead and let's try to make this leg move now. So in the example I showed you how I moved the leg. So okay, so the next thing I want to show you is what does the pin depth do? And so this is another really cool feature that I think the Puppet Warp tool allows us to do, which makes the trick to sell the trick, which is what we do, right? So I do have my anchor puppet pins on the feet, and I'm going to add one up here. And then I simply want to move this leg over like this to the other leg. Okay, And if I turn the mesh off, you'll see that that leg is the one I just moved is in the back. But what if I wanted it to be in the front? So that's where you can make sure that it's selected, the puppet point selected, and you can send to the back or front. And so if I say come to the front, you'll see that now this leg is in the front. Isn't that awesome? This is like really cool, cool technology here we have. And this is not a new feature, I would say, inside of Photoshop. Relatively, it's something that's been there, but I think it has gotten better as far as like if I move something, you know, it really reacts, the whole subject reacts and moves in accordance to this anchor point that is keeping everything sort of like, so again, don't move the actual pixels, but move the point. And so you can see how awesome this is. So I can, you know, really create like movements, like I said. So maybe I want it to be like, put another point there and see if that will help me. Careful not to stretch your pixels. Okay, that's why I turned the mesh off. I can also maybe anchor in there. I can anchor here and here. And see if I can get a little movement, not too much, in the ears. Maybe bring the face up a little bit. Actually, I don't want that point. So, okay, I want it that. Okay, so we just talked about how to make the certain parts go to the back or front using the pin depth. And we also spoke about how you can get something to curl or do a 180 if you were to hold the Option key down, Option Alt, and rotate. So we do have that function. Just make sure you're not over exaggerating these movements to distort the image too much where it's not looking cool anymore. Okay, so when we're inside editing in the Puppet Warp tool, you really have just like one undo, but you don't really have a history to really go to kind of go back, right? So if you look at my history, it's not really recording what's happening inside of the Puppet Warp tool. So the options you have, so if I wanted to redo that, I would have to go really to edit and say redo that last option, that last action I did, which is right here. And then I also can just work here with toggling the last state. So going back further if I wanted to, but you really don't have the history panel here to help you out. So I might want to kind of move certain parts also here. Don't put your pins too close together. And so I really just wanted to show you how you can create this. So when you are happy with your design, your Puppet Warp, you will then go up to the front here. By the way, if you wanted just to start over and go back to the initial state, you would hit this kind of like refresh button there with the arrow. But if you want to commit to the changes you've made with the Puppet Warp, just go ahead and click on that check mark, and voila, you have this layer now with the edits you've done with the Puppet Warp. So we'll go from that was our original, and this is our other one. So as you can see, if I were to keep duplicating my original or duplicating this one and then making little adjustments to each of them with the Puppet Warp tool, I can simply have an animation of like 5 to 10 frames and create a GIF that way. So that's another topic, but just to show you that you can actually do that. Again, I can actually go back into it and say if I wanted to make some additional, so like maybe I don't want the tail to be up in this one, so I can say, so remember I'm starting fresh, so you have to go back and redo all of these anchor points to stabilize it, because what I would like to do is pull the tail out. I actually don't want that one, so I kind of wanted something more like that, and then I'll say okay, check. Line these up a bit. you can see now what I'm talking about, having like an animation happening here. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell and how to use the Puppet Warp tool. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And so, like I said, you would keep duplicating these frames and keep going back into the Puppet Warp tool to create your unique movements. Okay, so good luck puppet warping.